Okay, so straight on with initial configuration video 2. So it turns out that majority of my videos, not very many people follow them through to the end. This is something that YouTube really looks down on. They're not very happy, so I'm going to try and make the videos shorter if I can, and try and make them more of a reference thing than me just waffling. Obviously that can only be for certain videos. When you have like big things like Samolth and stuff like that, there's a lot to configure. Anyhow, I digress. So we've done our first configuration, so now we've got management to the device, we've got a certificate created, and we've got our static IP address. The next thing we need to start doing is we need to start pushing traffic through the firewall. We need to allow traffic to go through the firewall. I'm just going to do a commit here because I absolutely didn't plan this properly, and I've just cleared the firewall off. So I'll do that commit now, and whilst that's doing, I'll just talk through what we're going to do. So we're going to have a fictionary LAN IP address of 200.0.0.1. That's going to be a /30, and that's going to be ETH11. And then we're going to have an inside LAN of 192.168.50.0/24 and a DMZ network of 51.0/24. They're going to have their own separate zones. We're going to set up the zones, and we are going to do the NAT rules and then quickly get it to pass traffic. Now, I'm afraid you're going to have to take my word for it that it'll work, and please leave in the comments if you tried and it didn't work, because this is on the config firewall, as you can see, which is not, it's not registered, it's not licensed, there's nothing behind it, there's nothing in the lab behind it, and indeed there's nothing in front of it really. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm just going to quickly check, make sure that's, yep, that's going to push okay, just let it finish. Okay, and that is now completed. So first thing I'm going to configure is going to configure our interfaces. So we're in here now. I'm going to configure the interface. So this is going to be our internet. It's not going to be our IN6 internet interface. You know, I really should have learned to type. So then we've got the interface type. So we've got TAP, which is, as it suggests, it's a TAP interface, so often seen on proof of concepts and so on and so forth. When they do a TAP interface, they simply they plug that into a switch. Switch has usually got a span session running or something like that, and then that's sending packets to the firewall. Clearly the firewall's not going to have anything to do with it. It doesn't go through the firewall simply sees that traffic. And then at the end of that, Palo Alto sales engineers can come in and go, our firewalls caught all these applications that aren't sanctioned, our firewalls caught all these threats that you didn't know about, and then they attempt to sell you something. So the HA then, the HA, we know what HA is high availability, and that would turn this interface into a high availability interface, and thus wouldn't be able to be used for data running through the traffic, running through the firewall, sorry. Virtual wire is basically a bump in the wire. So if you have an environment that you want to insert a Palo Alto firewall into, or any firewall for that matter, but you don't want it to interfere at all with any of the MAC tables, any of the addressing or anything like that, you do a virtual wire. Virtual wire is literally as if you are joining two ends of a wire together. And so there are some restrictions with that, as I've seen in earlier videos, but I'm going to start redoing some of my earlier videos. So there are some restrictions with that of what you can do with virtual wires, but actually the functionality is pretty good. Layer 2, again, speaks for itself. Layer 2, then you're going to have VLAN interfaces, and you're going to start working on VLAN, sorry. And in layer 3, it's a layer 3 interface now. In our particular instance, we want to do routing off of this, so we're going to create a layer 3 interface. We have no net flow. If anybody can suggest underneath a decent open source net flow that somebody as daft as me would be able to configure, then please do so, and I'll do a video of net flow profiles and so on. Then what we need to do then is we need to assign it to a virtual router. Now it's perfectly named default. All firewalls they have a default router already configured, and by doing this we now assign this interface to that router. So next we've got a security zone. Now you cannot pass traffic without a security zone, and in this particular instance, in my desperate bid to clean everything up, I forgot to erase the outside interface that was used in a previous demonstration. So we're going to pick outside for this one because this is our internet. Okay, and we're going to give it an IP address. 0.0.1/30. Some people use an object there. You can use an object in it but I don't tend to. I tend to just have it as an IP address, because if there's an object somewhere down the road and then somebody accidentally changes that object without really understanding the context behind it, because we don't often have good comments and everything on a firewall, then it can cause real problems. And of course we've got SD-WAN that we can enable on it. We've got the PPPoE, point-to-point over Ethernet. We can do that, and then that changes the configuration as well. And then DHCP client, if you want it to be a DHCP client. And as I said in the previous video, that then means that you can then use that as an inheritance source further down the line. We're not going to do IPv6 because frankly it baffles me. We haven't got SD-WAN. So the next thing is then the advanced. So the link settings, speak for myself again, link speed, it's the same as always, link state auto, and so on. That can be set to up or down, so it's admin up or admin down. Then we've got other info, so we've got all the MSS stuff. We're not going to worry about that too much at the minute. We're going to create a management profile though. And the reason we're going to create a management profile is because we need to be able to ping from this interface to check connectivity. It's something everybody wants to do. So I just rushed through that. So I'm going to show you. So with the vast majority, I'd say 99% of things, you can create it from here, from this context. So we can create it here. We're going to call this ping only, and we're going to allow ping. We're not going to allow any of the administrative services because this is outside, and that would then expose administrative services to the outside world. But we could do SNMP and response page and user ID and so on. Okay, that will now be available. It's been selected in this. Interface, but that will now be available for our other interfaces, as we'll see. So now we're going to do our Ethernet 1.2, which is going to be our inside interface. So this is going to be our LAN interface, and that again is going to be a layer 3. We're going to put it on the same virtual router, and then we're going to do the same as we did with the management profile. We're going to create a zone on the fly. So this is going to be the LAN zone, because I have absolutely no imagination. If we had log forwarding, we could create a log setting for it as well, so that's going to be log settings. Enable packet buffer protection is a global thing and set per zone, and that's all configured within setup. We don't need to add an interface to it because we're doing it directly from the interface, so the interface will go into it. And then if we had zone protection profiles, we can do it from here, and again we can then do it new from here, but we haven't, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Okay, so then that's LAN zone created, and our IP address for that is going to be /24. Okay, and we're going to add our previously created ping only management profile to that. Okay, and then we'll quickly do our Ethernet 3, which 1.3, which as we know is going to be our DMZ. Okay, it's going to be layer 3, going to be no net flow, and again we're going to have it on the same virtual router. You can do, there's a lot can be done with virtual routers. In fact, actually, this is the first time in this particular engagement that I'm in at the minute where we've done so much routing on the firewall, and I've discovered that Palo is just awesome for routing. It really does provide a lot of functionality. Okay, so that's our interface is done. Not up as yet because we haven't, and I haven't put a IPv4 address on it. That's what I get for talking, so I'll quickly do that now. Okay. Okay, right. So that's all done now. So the interfaces are all done. And now we move on to our virtual router. So our virtual router, we're going to click into virtual routers. Just to show you as well, if you're looking for anything on virtual routers, you're looking for any kind of information on the routes and everything like that. So if you look at the routing table, you can go into more runtime stats. Once this has got once the interfaces are up, it'll have the connected subnets on it as well that's taken from the interfaces. Okay, but we're going to configure this here. Now you can see that by adding those at the interface level by adding them, they've ended up in here. So this is where they are. So we're going to put a static route in, and our static route is going to be the default route. And that is going to go 0. And then the interface that was going to go out of is 1.1, and our next hop is an IP address, which is going to be our fictional gateway. .2. Okay, and if you wanted path monitoring as well, so if we had two static routes, we had two ISPs, we could do that as well. Can have a look at path monitoring later. Okay, so now we've got a static route. So now we've got our network, and we have our route out to the internet. Now what we need to do is create the rules. It's going to come to the security rules, and this is where we want to put some rules on now that are going to give us our best chance of making it as secure as possible. But we're trying to simulate here. We're just putting a firewall into an existing environment, or we're building an environment for new, and we don't really know what traffic's going to be across it. So really quickly here, we look at the intra-zone default rules and the inter-zone default rules, and there is no logging on those. Okay, now the best practice could be to put a drop all log above, but then you've got to bear in mind that anything the firewall's doing will get caught by that drop all log, rather than being able to drop down to the intra-zone default. What I tend to do is, if you click on it, go down to override, actions, so we can log at session start and log at session end should we desire. Remember, log at session start will create a lot of logs, and we can do the same with the inter-zone default. Okay, and again you got log forward in there as well. So now what we've got is we've basically got the drop all, and it is logging, and we've got the intra-zone default. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a rule for our internet. Sorry, no, we're not going to create that. LAN to internet, and this is going to be an application rule. So this is going to be an application default rule. The idea behind this application default rule is we're going to catch all applications that are using their defaults. Okay, so we're going to go from our source address, which is going to be, again, we can create an address from here. So let's create an address from here. So this is going to be our LAN subnet, which is going to be the 192.168.50.0/24. Okay, because we want to really, when we're creating rules, we want to make sure they are as tied down as possible. Okay, so then destination is going to be to the outside. No destination for that, obviously. An application any, an application defaults, and we're going to log at the session end, and we're going to allow that. Now you could also put profiles in there as well. We'll look at that afterwards. Log forwarding again is here. An interesting thing about log forwarding is, in fact, I'll show you in a second. So if we create a log forwarding profile that is default, it'll only take us 2 seconds. Log forwarding profile that's default, then it'll add it by default in the next rules. And then we've got our quas. Okay, so that's going to handle our LAN to subnet. We'll quickly go over to objects, log forwarding. Going to create a log forwarding rules. This is going to be our default AULT log forwarding profile, and then just for the sake of this, we're going to call this traffic logs, all traffic logs, and we're going to send it to Panorama. I'm going to click OK. So coming back to our policies now, as long as I've named that correctly. So our next one then is going to be, so we're going to catch all the potential traffic, all the traffic coming after us that isn't using the standard application default ports. So this is LAN to internet non-standard. So applications using non-standard ports for discovery. Okay, we can also put a tag on that as well, so we can tag that for later. So our source zone is going to be our LAN zone again. Our source address is going to be and we'll see it here in our LAN subnet. Destination is going to be to the outside. Okay, now instead of under service category, although under application we've got all applications, under here we're going to put any, and we're going to log at session start and log at session end as well, because we need to see this traffic. Okay, then we're going to add our DMZ to, oh, hang on, that's fat fingered that, to internet. DMZ to internet, so this is going to be DMZ to internet application defaults. Okay. This is going to come from DMZ, and our source address, which is going to be our DMZ zone. Again, we just click on that, so DMZ subnet. Okay, and that's going to be 192.168.0.51, I said, didn't I? 51? 0. No, hang on. 51.0, thank you, /24. Making up my own IP addresses there. Okay, and the destination is going to be to go outside. The application is going to be any, application defaults, then the actions. And I did actually, it was on there as well, as we can see there, but you can see that it's automatically added the log forwarding profile. So it's perfectly good practice to have multiple log forwarding profiles for different reasons, but to avoid any issue where you have people adding rules and forgetting to put the log forwarding profile on, that is just a catch-all. And then of course we can just click on it as well, just to fix this one. Okay, I'll just pause it there and I'll put the last rule in as well. See, so now you can see we've got our rules in there. So this is going to allow our traffic to go out, and this is going to make sure that we catch anything that is on standard ports, application defaults. We'll go through these rules first, and then anything that is on the non-standard ports will hit the one underneath, and then everything else will be blocked. So that's okay. So now we've got our route, we've got our interfaces, we've got our rules. We just need a NAT rule now. And standard NAT rule for this, again, is going to be, we're just going to do dynamic IP and port. We have a single IP address on the front end, so we don't need any other IP addresses. So we are going to create, so this is going to be our hide NAT. Internal networks. Okay, our source zone is going to be our DMZ. And our LAN zone. Destination zone is going to be outside. Now, if you had multiple interfaces on an outside zone, you wanted this to go a specific way, so you had PBF rules, or you had a certain rule that sent a certain traffic a certain way, sort of routing or so on, you would select the destination interface. Personally, I like to select it anyway, just because then I know it's done. Service is any, and then we've got our source addresses, which is going to be our DMZ subnet, and our LAN subnet. No destination addresses because this is just dynamic IP and port. So the source translation we're going to do is dynamic IP and port, dynamic IP, static IP. We're going to do dynamic IP and port because we want standard hide NAT. And then we can either select a translated address and then put the address in here for the outside interface, for our ETH11 interface, which would work perfectly. Or we can just do an interface address, select our interface address, which is 11, and then we can even select the address that's on it. Okay, so now we've got our NAT rule as well, and again, that's very locked down. That's coming from DMZ zone and LAN zone. It's going to outside, and it's only going to translate those source addresses. It's not going to translate anything else. So if anything else comes up, or if somebody tries to spoof anything and try and get out, they won't be able to. There's no destination translation because we don't need it. So now we have everything except for the application, the security profiles, and putting applications in the rules. We have everything that we need now to start passing traffic through this firewall, and it's going to be relatively secure. So we'll just commit that. Okay, Okay, and that configuration is committed successfully. It was a little bit of I was sweating a little bit there because it did take a very long time. I assume this is something to do with it not being licensed. And I can quite honestly say that I have failed. I wanted this video to be very, very short. It's taken 20 minutes. I do apologise. But then that's it. So in the next video, what we'll do now is we will work on the DHCP. So we're going to give DHCP from the firewall to our users that are going to be on those subnets, and then we can look at putting our standard security profiles on them as well. Okay, so I hope you watched to the end. If you did, that's absolutely fantastic. It makes YouTube sing and dance and puts me forward as being a good fella. I'll see you in the next video.